The 2 hour delay.
Yes. I was literally like,
It hits at different times. That's what's kind of disconcerting about about
I
those drinks.
know. Yeah.
You just never
Yeah.
know.
Don't plan to drive in the next day
Yeah.
if you're not used to this stuff. But it said it was only 3 milligrams. I
Yeah.
mean, that's crazy.
Yeah, it takes more than 3 millis to get old big boy Harry off the ground.
To get him off the ground.
Yeah, yes.
To make him
Yeah.
levitate.
And then it takes about 20 to get him back on the ground.
Oh, that would be a good commercial. Uh,
Where are you, Jen? Are you in Vermont?
I'm in Vermont and I'll be then in Bluffton and then obviously San Antonio and then back to Vermont and then Montreal for my vacation. So make sure you look at the calendar again because it's been in there.
Vacation? We don't
Yes.
allow We haven't allowed vacations at this company since 1996.
Yeah, you guys get vacation?
Yeah, what?
I am taking vacation. Harry, you wouldn't know anyway.
I'm on a permanent vacation.
Yeah.
Hello, Lisa.
Very woodsy backdrop you have going on. It's like
I know.
logs.
I know.
I know. I'm in Vermont. Oh, are you talking about me or Harry?
No,
'Cause there's
both of us look like we're just straight out of Fargo.
Yeah.
right.
It's so fabulous to see you guys, Beer Fam.
Yeah.
Long time.
Yes.
Not that I
Long
haven't
time,
been
Lisa.
following. I tell you what, I still have PTSD because for so many years, the tenor of my day every day was 100% determined by the contents of your newsletter, which
Oh.
was read before most of our executives even got out of bed. And by the time I got to work, everybody was either really whipped up
Yeah.
or it was going to be a quiet day in which I could move forward with my to-do list. So never knew what I was walking into. You guys are the real influencers.
Oh, and you're still talking to us. We very much appreciate that.
Of course. I still follow everything you guys do.
Well, I'd like to welcome to Beernet Radio Lisa Weser, founder of Trailblaze, the go-to PR/communications agency specializing in cannabis and wellness brands. And your clients include Seth Rogen's houseplant brand to Martha Stewart CBD, MedRx. I think I even saw Waterburger on there. So who's who, right? And again, as we mentioned, former head of U.S. marketing communications at AB. You made the pivot from Queen of Beers to the cannabis publicist in 2018. Founding Trailblaze to bring a more sophisticated, big CPG storytelling approach to the developing cannabis industry, which to me seems like, taming a wild horse and then running him in the Kentucky Derby. I don't know how you do that, but that's what you're here to talk
100%,
about.
especially in those days in 2017, 2018, when I first dipped my toe into it, it was an extreme unknown.
Crazy. Well, so I guess start there if you would. I mean, when we first met, you were working again at the top of comms at AB. Did you decide to leave to do this, to start this cannabis company for PR, or was it a more circuitous route?
Yeah, I think the bellwether for me was kind of mid 2017. Constellation Brands announced that they were going to be investing 10% at the time into Canopy Growth, which at that time was the biggest cannabis company in the world. And, I sat in marketing, but I was surrounded by also kind of our attorneys who had been watching this space as a, competitor for several years. And I kind of just saw everybody freak out. And I knew at that point, okay, now this industry is going to stop fighting cannabis and start investing in it. So I started talking to some of the agencies that I worked with and asked them how they were going to, play in this space. And they all were like, we're not touching it until it's federally legal. And I thought, there's an awful lot of money in this space. There's really nobody that is doing marketing and communications in any kind of sophisticated way. They're going to need help and nobody wants to touch it. So honestly, I just saw a white space at the time. I knew nothing about cannabis. I hadn't even consumed cannabis since high school, but I did know beverage. And CBD beverages at the time were just beginning to take off. And so that was really the entree that I saw. And people thought I was absolutely insane to just walk away from one of the biggest jobs in, CPG communications. But at that point, I had just done my sixth Super Bowl. I had, seen the world, all of the different activations, and I did kind of feel like it was time to move on. And this just seemed like too much of an enticing challenge not to take up. So yeah, I took a big bet on myself, and so far it's paying off.
That's really, really cool. That's exciting. And obviously, like you said, it paid off. I'm curious, what though were some of your best moments, best memories that you had when you were at AB? Was it like a Super Bowl? Was it some sort of other campaign or?
Yes, memories, nightmares, where to begin? I really did see it all. It's funny, my very first day on the job was at Samcom in 2012. I had accepted the role, and my boss at the time, said, before you even come into the office, we have this Samcom event. It's our biggest event of the year. You really need to be at it. It sets the tone for the whole year. So I came to Chicago, which was where Samcom was that year in 2012, met my team at a bar, and walked right into Samcom and was basically shot out of a cannon from that moment on into the incredible world of beer marketing. And, to this day, I tell people that working at AB is an absolute masterclass in marketing, because you really do and see it all, and in business for that matter. Most of the leaders, everybody has a Harvard MBA. You're working with some of the best marketing agencies and creatives in the world. You're working with the biggest budgets, in marketing. They're sponsoring basically every property known to man across sports and entertainment. You're able to really make your bold ideas come true. There were things that I pitched that I never could have done anyplace else that I was able to do there, whether it was, sending beer to Mars or, making a reality show. So it was incredible. And, the relationships that I formed there are still really important. Many of my clients today are ex-ABI people that have gone into other categories. And a few of my employees are ex-ABI. I just hired a EVP, who I hired 10 years ago there, who is back again. So those relationships and that family have been really key. I think if you look at the internet, probably my most memorable moment was during the 2016 Super Bowl when Peyton Manning name-checked Budweiser. And the funny story is I had gone to the game with Jorn Soke, who was our CMO at the time, Alex Lambrecht, who was our head of Bud Light, and a few of the other executives. And, we'd been sitting at the game in San Francisco. And at the very end of the game, they were anxious about traffic. And so we walked out of the last, 10 minutes of the game and, got in our Mercedes Sprinter so we could get out of there before the traffic got crazy. And as we're driving away, I start getting texts and messages from people saying, "Oh my God, can you believe Peyton Manning said that?" And I was like, "What?" So of course I look and I see what he has said. My phone immediately starts ringing with journalists, wanting to know if we paid Peyton Manning to say that. And so I was sitting with all our executives and I was like, "Guys, what's the story here? Did we pay for this?" And they were like, "No, absolutely not." And so, I just shoot off a little text on my phone, like just to clarify, because getting so many calls, I'll just put a tweet out that says, that we did not pay for this. So I tweeted it, put my phone down, went back to the hotel, woke up in the morning, and one of my friends had texted me and said, "You're on the homepage of Twitter. You're on the Today Show." And so that was really wild. To this day, I think a lot of my Google results are forever tied to Peyton Manning, whether he knows it or not. So lots of wild memories, many of which I'll have to keep under lock and key till my book. But yeah, incredible experience and learned so much.
I was going to ask you, how was it waking up to BBD every morning over that stretch? But you kind of answered that. So, in a similar
Probably
vein,
painful.
yeah, what else was the toughest part of your job while working at AB?
When I was interviewing somebody recently, they said, when I've researched you, it seems like you have spent a lot of time apologizing for Bud Light. There's so many exciting parts of that job that are very much about events and entertainment and fun. But 50% of my job was promoting these brands, 50% was protecting it. And brands this big are always a target, Bud Light more than any, as we have seen over the years. And so, that was a big aspect of my job was, trying to get ahead of those things or, respond to them very quickly when they happened. I don't know if you remember the infamous Bud Light scroll bottle, which was the perfect beer for eliminating no from your vocabulary, which people,
Oh yeah.
immediately took as rapey, and immediately started to become, a bit of a mini crisis. And that was 2 weeks in a war room, convincing our supply chain that they needed to spend more than $1 million shutting down the line that was printing those labels. And investing in that. And, well, even though it wasn't intentional, we still needed to acknowledge it. We still needed to apologize, whether it was our fault or not. And, so there were just a lot of moments like that where I think, we were really lucky that communications had a place at the table and we were able to influence a lot of processes, before things got out of hand. So that was a big part of the job, and it was very difficult, but probably where I learned the most. And I think the skills that I learned in those war rooms, of which there were many, really helped me now in the cannabis industry to see around corners and help be preventative about things before they happen. Because, another regulated industry that's still very nascent, there's a lot of things that have already gone down in alcohol that haven't come to cannabis yet, but surely will. So, I've really used those experiences to inform how I counsel my clients now.
Looking back at AB now, and I'm sure you still follow along, is there any piece of news or a campaign or any sort of marketing that you wished you would have been involved in, or that you kind of long for?
I don't think that there's anything from a marketing perspective that I wish I'd been a part of. I think I got to do everything I wanted to do when I was there. It did obviously really pain me to see how the past couple years have gone down for Bud Light, because I felt like I had spent so many years really bolstering and protecting the reputation of that brand, and to see it just completely crumble, over like a 3-week period, and how it was handled, which was really different from, I think, the way that we had approached things when I was there, was really disappointing, and kind of ironic to see, a beer that for since it launched has been the number one beer in America, and an American made beer, to be replaced by, a Mexican beer, which was probably not the intent of, the people that started that whole boycott. But I never thought it was possible to dethrone Bud Light, and it happened. So that's really, disappointing to see, even though I think it would have been incredibly painful. I would have loved to be in that room, because I do, I've done enough crisis to, have some thoughts about how it could have been handled differently. But I wasn't there, wasn't in the room. So, I'll never know. But yeah, there's certainly some things that, we all, I think, working there, see ourselves as stewards of the brand. These are brands that in some cases are more than 100 years old. We have our short time with them, and our goal is to kind of make them better, not damage them, and protect them for like the next generation. And so I was very invested in that, and spent, a lot of my time and career doing that across their whole portfolio. So it's always a bummer to walk away and see things change. But, that's what it is. That's what the job is.
I'm curious. I mean, and you kind of alluded to that, but do you think that their approach has like fundamentally changed since you've been there, or do you think things are still kind of the same? Just curious your perspective as somebody who's been inside that war room, as you said.
I don't know that their approach at the time had fundamentally changed, but I do think the environment that they are marketing in has
Mhm.
fundamentally changed. And that was already underway when I was there. Because ironically, when I saw this latest mishap come about, I thought, we have always activated in this space. We were going to GLAD events, and, we were making, commemorative cans with people's face on it for years before something like this blew up, really, kind of what changed. And obviously the political environment did. I think the difference is, this was already starting when I was there in 2017. I don't know if you remember the immigration Super Bowl spot that we did for Budweiser, that was focused on Adolphus Bush's experience, landing in the US from Germany. And so that was a spot, that we had been developing since May, the prior year. Super Bowl ads, of course, are not made overnight, and it was really about telling that story. So I had that spot teed up to run on the first spot, the first spot on the Today Show Monday morning to debut that spot. And then I believe it was Friday night or Saturday night, Trump announced an immigration ban that sent, all the journalists to LaGuardia and made that very much the news. And so immediately the war room commenced. And it was a 2-week process of managing that because there were a lot of questions like we couldn't stop that train. Should we not run the ad? Should we change the ad? And at that time, the conversation was really about staying the course, but really being able to, articulate the purpose of the ad and not really step on the wrong side of the aisle for either of our consumers, and also really just to communicate with our distributors, many of whom were in southern states and who were very concerned about sales. We had Breitbart, boycotting Budweiser on Twitter. We enacted, a ton of social media monitoring. So we just had a very thoughtful response to that. And while it did bubble up, there was a very quick recovery, and it was ultimately a successful spot that did run. And so, I don't know what has changed. I'm not there, and I never hated anything more than when people talked about what we were doing that we're no longer working there. So I don't want to be the one to do that, but something did fundamentally change in how they approached their response to that. I think the other thing that I have seen is when I was there, there was very much a focus on diversifying the marketing team. The team that I joined in 2012 was, based in St. Louis, a lot of people that had been there many, many years, probably over 75% male, and a little bit older, people in their 30s, 40s, 50s. And when we moved to New York City, there was really a concentrated effort to hire at the time millennials, kind of younger staff and more diversified staff, and also to bring more women into marketing. That was something I think Marcel Marcondes really prioritized. And at the time I left, it was about 53% women in marketing, which was really unprecedented. And we had women running brands for the first time ever. Azania Andrews did incredible things with Ultra, for example, and really set that on the trajectory that it continues to be today. I have heard that there's been some, reverting to type culturally there in terms of some of the numbers in marketing and a more conservative approach overall, which is too bad. But again, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about what they're doing because I have my hands extremely full in both cannabis and alcohol. But it is, I do hear things, and it is always interesting to watch that evolve from afar.
Yeah.
And did you move? I'm sorry.
No.
Did you move from New York to LA as part of this?
So my office did. When I left New York, I actually moved to Ohio for what was supposed to be a temporary, like, let's move someplace. When I walked away from ABI, they're no longer, paying me that salary. I wanted to start my own company, so we moved to my husband's hometown in Ohio for what was supposed to be a short stint. And then COVID hit. So instead of moving to LA, which was the intent, we ended up staying in Ohio. So my team is in LA, my office is in LA, and I also have a team and an office in New York, but I physically reside in Ohio, which honestly is really interesting because it keeps me very grounded. I think a lot of brands experience that coastal elitism in terms of how they market and not being super in touch with everyday Americans. So between having 3 teenagers and living where I live, I feel like it does give me a bigger aperture of what's going on with consumers.
And you're right between both markets, so you can go one way or the other.
Absolutely.
No problem.
Absolutely. North or south, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I'm still an EST, so that's very important to me.
Yeah, right. And how different is marketing these cannabis products than beer? Like, it's just so nascent. I mean, it's not really nascent anymore, I guess, but it's still so fragmented. I think that's what that industry needs more than anything is branding, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it needs branding, it needs marketing, and it really needs an understanding of distribution, because while the marketing is really important, if brands don't have distribution, especially beverage brands, it doesn't matter how much they spend on marketing or PR. So that's something that I think the ones that have really learned from big alcohol and big soda and have, partnered with, those distributors have gotten into Total Wine are the ones that really have a head start. But you're right, Harry. I mean, when you think about cannabis, you can't build a national brand very easily with cannabis because you're selling state by state. Everything sold in a state has to be grown and processed in that state. It cannot cross state lines. And I think that's why we're seeing the huge boom we're seeing now in hemp. And being in this space since the end of 2017, I kind of came into it when CBD was just taking off and CBD beverages were everywhere, and very popular, although there was a lot of conversation around like, is this actually doing anything? It's not intoxicating. I don't know if I'm feeling anything. Then we saw people kind of drop CBD and move into regulated marijuana-derived THC, which really had a moment, but still experienced everyday consumers not walking into a dispensary. And even if they went once or twice, they weren't going to go regularly enough to really, establish the kind of sales or branding that a brand needs to see. So finally, people figured out this loophole in the Farm Bill to create the best of both worlds, which is hemp-derived THC. And the way I like to explain it to people, because I think education is the biggest challenge, people don't know why they're suddenly able to buy intoxicating THC at like an alcohol store, is because, I like to say, when you're trying to get milk, if you've got a fat cow and a skinny cow, you can get the same amount of milk, but you're going to work a lot harder to get it out of the skinny cow. In the same way, a marijuana plant has a lot of THC. Hemp has a smaller amount of THC, but you can work harder and use more hemp to extract the same amount of intoxicating Delta 9 THC out of a hemp plant as you can a marijuana plant. But because the Farm Bill does allow hemp to be legal nationwide for the most part, some states have put their own regulations in place, but that makes it legal to cross state lines, to sell online, and to sell in alcohol stores, groceries, C-stores. And that's been a huge game changer. And we've seen a lot of brands kind of shift from focusing on their regulated products to really putting their eggs in this basket of hemp-derived THC, which is also scary because there's always the lingering threat of, could somebody come down and change the Farm Bill and close that loophole and shut this whole thing down? But what we hear again and again from our clients is that it's a risk to do it. It's a bigger risk not to do it. So that's very much where the focus is right now and where the growth and opportunity seems to be.
And even if they close the loophole, my thought is, who cares? THC is illegal anyway. So I get it. It's a loophole, but are the feds really going to come after hemp derived? It's
I
gotten
think
so
the challenge
big.
is the companies that are really going to be successful really need to be thinking a lot about compliance, and how they are going to go to market. I mean, I honestly think the end game here is that you're going to see ABI and Coca-Cola and Miller Coors acquire these brands. And so they are going to have to, build their brands being both federally and state compliant, and also really making sure that that product consistency is there. There was a time when I was at ABI where we had a massive ABV lawsuit because someone had bought several bottles of Budweiser and tested them, and the ABV was slightly off, by like just the tiniest percentage, but what didn't match what it said on the can, and that launched a class action lawsuit that was something that was expensive and that we really had to handle. So when you think about something like that being able to happen to Budweiser and how expensive something like that can be, if you are a brand that's trying to tee yourself up for acquisition, you need to be able to show that you can consistently produce quality product that tastes good, and that the can, includes, or the bottle includes what it says on the label. And that is very, very hard to do. People are getting better at it. Nobody does it better than ABI, of course. But that is something that I think is really important. So the clients I work with are very focused on compliance. And if anything, I think they're saying, regulate us, tax us. We want to participate in a legal economy, and the fact that these things aren't fully regulated means that you do have bad actors who can come in and sell whatever they want, and that's kind of spoiling the game for everyone. You shouldn't be selling 100 milligram products in a gas station. Nobody needs 100 milligrams in one gummy or in one beverage. that's an incredibly intoxicating amount. And, for most people, a standard dose is 5 or 10 milligrams. So that's really irresponsible, as is a lot of the marketing that appeal to children or is a very clear IP violation of brands like Skittles and, some of the candy brands. So, seeing a lot of that, which I think threatens the whole category. And that's something that's a bit unique to THC, as opposed to other industries that have really gotten kind of self-regulation down.
And what do you think needs to happen before those strategics get in? And how long do you think that will take? Do you think that it needs to really be codified regulatorily and then the strategics will get in? Or do you think somebody like a Boston Beer might take it right to the line and then everybody else will follow type thing?
Yeah, I mean, Boston Beer is already in the game. They have
Yeah.
their teapot product. I think, Pabst, they have Pabst Labs where they're making their own products. Their Lagunitas got in it really early with THC beer. So I think there's a lot of kind of mid-size actors that have been experimenting in this for some time to kind of build their own brands. But I do think the acquisition will happen. I think it's going to emulate what we saw in craft beer in like 2011, 2012, 2013 in terms of how it goes down. When it's going to happen, if I knew that, I would not be working every day. I'd be playing the stock market. Nobody knows because nobody knows what this administration is going to do. There's a lot of promises that are made all of the time about what's going to happen with legalization. And we're both playing with federal legalization and state by state legalization, THC, marijuana, and hemp. So it's anybody's game. Nobody really knows what the timeline will be, but I don't think it's going away. And I do think that it will go the way of craft, where you'll have some of these larger brands really start to grow and then start to slowly be acquired by these larger operators that will then really take on board, the compliance and the streamlining and the product quality and the scale.
I think there are so many craft analogies to this space, right? I mean, would you agree? I just feel, the way that distributors are picking up these brands without sometimes even really knowing what they are, just because they don't want a competitor to get it. The way that these guys have to brand build, like you said, people just jumping in the space because it's hot. Anything else that I'm forgetting?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. These are just really starting to get in and start to compete. But I think one thing that they are doing is catching the eye of distributors. I've actually had some ABI distributors that have brought me on from time to time to consult and really educate them about hemp beverages. And have worked with some former ABI distributors that told me that these, intoxicating THC beverages are outselling the CBD beverages that they used to sell 4 to 1 at minimum, and that they were really interested in investing in these to help make up some of the losses they were experiencing in beer, Bud Light in particular, but just overall, beer losing share, and them trying to find other ways, to make up that revenue. And so these are selling really well. We're seeing, end caps with a lot of different products on the shelf. We do have this different challenge where it is really tough to have brand recognition or national recognition of a brand because marketing remains really limited in what you can do in cannabis. Just this week, a bunch of cannabis brands were shut down on Instagram. That is still very much a problem. Some of the largest brands can't even maintain an Instagram page because they're constantly being shut down. I think that's why we have seen a lot of brands turn to celebrity backing and leaning on celebrities to help them build brand awareness and also just to encourage people that this is safe, that it's legal, and that it's socially acceptable. I mean, Martha Stewart being a great example of somebody that has really done a lot to help normalize this category for your basic housewife, while also, keeping the street cred that comes with, being tight with Snoop, which is a very authentic friendship, by the way.
I love that. It's such an unlikely friendship, but it does seem like it's legit. And I just wanted to note that your thing about Instagram, this podcast will be shadow banned on YouTube. Every time we even talk about THC at all.
Mhm.
Which is fine because Spotify and Apple are where we get most of our listeners anyway. So
Yeah, it's a massive challenge. I mean, for me, it's been an opportunity because public relations, influencer work is really an important strategy, more so than in other categories, because it is a really core way that people can build brand awareness. And just get out there and tell their story when they're very limited from the types of paid marketing that other brands can use. I mean, you certainly can't make a Super Bowl ad for a cannabis product yet, although I hope to be the first to do it when it happens. But yeah, it's a very different challenge. But for me, it has absolutely been an opportunity. But we still, there's still a lot of reefer madness going on. It seems like it's actually amping up a little bit lately. And so, we're always one step forward, two more back, but we just keep slowly moving forward. It's come a long way, just in like the 7, 8 years since I got into the space.
In that vein, I got a couple communication questions for you. On first, what is the name that will stick for this emerging hemp-derived beverage space? Hemp beverages kind of sounds a little soft. Intoxicating hemp sounds a little strong.
Mhm.
THC beverages is kind of confusing, so is D9. What do you
Mhm.
think will be the name going forward for
Yeah.
suppliers, distributors,
I think
retailers?
that most brands that I have worked with are really trying to settle in just around THC. Because ultimately that is the common compound. And I think if we can educate people that regardless of which type of plant it derives from, THC is THC, THC is intoxicating. I think that is, where most brands are trying to lean in or own or market. But that is still requiring a lot of education amongst consumers. I think a lot of them still don't fully understand why they're able to buy something illegal, in a liquor store. But yeah, THC, just the ingredient itself, seems to be something that at least everybody knows what it is. Everybody knows what it does. Versus something like hemp, which, is that something you make clothing with? I thought that didn't
Yeah,
get me high. But it is a challenge. I mean, we can't even land on a word. Even within the industry, the word marijuana is very much a lightning rod. Many people think that
yeah.
that has racist origins and don't want to use it. But at the same time, how do you distinguish an intoxicating, marijuana plant from a hemp plant? So the lexicon, nobody has figured it out. In fact, one of the things I would love to see cannabis learn from alcohol, and I think it's starting to happen. Alcohol has done a really good job just at the industry banding together and lobbying together around certain things to get wins for the whole industry. And I haven't seen that happen as much in THC. Everybody is still their own actor. It's very competitive. It's very much about who's getting what licenses and who can build share in the state the fastest. We are starting to see a few groups like the Hemp Beverage Alliance that are starting to, bring members in from lots of different brands to all kind of lobby for that space together in DC. So it's starting to happen, but it's still super fragmented. So they can't even decide on a word on
Yeah.
what to call the product.
Yeah, my other communication question is, can these types of THC beverages and beverage alcohol ultimately play nice? I mean, you already start to kind of see some players talking about how these beverages are better for you than alcohol and kind of demonizing alcohol. Does that messaging get stronger and pit them more and more against each other, or where do you see that relationship kind of going from here?
In the past couple of years, I've seen a big shift with our beverage clients not wanting to demonize alcohol, but to play in the same sandbox. And I think it's for a few reasons. I think that we've kind of realized that these products do live side by side, not just on the shelf, but in people's lives. If you think about it, somebody that doesn't smoke at all is not going to just start smoking marijuana, right? Smoking is smoking. If inhalation is not something that you do, you're not probably going to start it. Similarly, if you're used to drinking alcohol and that's a format that's familiar to you, shifting to a THC beverage probably isn't such a big leap, whereas like smoking a joint might be, right? So, those consumer behaviors, I think, are really important. And I think we're seeing that most people use both. They're either, alcohol sometimes in THC other times, or, they're just trying to reduce their consumption. I think for alcohol, the biggest challenge is this massive shift that we are seeing now in health and longevity combined with, my ears are very perked up about the Surgeon General warning, which hasn't really gone anywhere. But when I think about how that shifted the tobacco industry over 20 years and what could happen to alcohol if that continues to move forward, especially with somebody like RFK in the administration, I think that just as cannabis is hedging its bets with both hemp and marijuana, I think big alcohol is hedging its bets by, trying to start to bring both non-alcoholic beverages and, adult alternative beverages, kind of into the fray. And distributors absolutely are playing all sides, just trying to make a buck, right? So yeah, I think it's all going to ultimately come together, Jordan, into one space. But it's just the regulatory piece and the just a lot of, frankly, prejudice around cannabis is just making it a much slower process than it is for like a poppy with a probiotic or an athletic brewing with a NA. That's a much smaller hill to climb.
Right.
It'll happen though.
It does, Lisa, it does seem like there's also a little bit of in-family fighting between the dispensary THC recreational market and the hemp market. And
Very
for
much.
instance, in California, I think they were successful in getting hemp off the shelf,
Yeah.
even though it's federally legal. It's very interesting to me because in my view, when this first, 10, 12 years ago, when this started really, the rec market started ramping up, I remember writing an article saying, that's great, but you have to tax it like alcohol, and you have to make it illegal to have non-tax product.
Mm-hmm.
And states like California and Oregon and Colorado did the opposite. They decriminalized it at the same time, and then they taxed it, just out the roof, so that you have legal weed being 3 times the price of illicit weed, and so they wonder why that market is kind of cratering, and then they see where hemp is kind of more like alcohol, where it's regulated at all, and it's doing great. Right.
Yeah.
And so it seems like to me, the early states kind of screwed the pooch. They got in too early. And now we're seeing a more like Texas right now is creating a regulatory and tax structure that appears to be similar to alcohol. So am I describing that correctly from your point of view?
Yeah, I think we're kind of teeing ourselves up for like a great taste, less filling kind of world where, it's odd that they're competing. But when you think about it, if you are somebody that, let's say the state of New York, you fought really hard to get a license in New York. It's a very expensive process, very competitive and very political to get one of those handfuls of regulated licenses in the state of New York. But you've done it. You've invested in your cultivation, your processing, your retail partnerships, your marketing, and you're selling regulated THC. Now, every bodega on your street is now carrying a THC beverage that is intoxicating. You don't have to show an ID to go in that door and make that purchase. And the price is going to be probably a lot lower than what you're going to find in a dispensary. So I think that's what it's about, is that the regulated cannabis players that have done all of that work and all of that investment to have ownership in a market and really build that share are now very threatened by these hemp actors. And they're very much playing the card of a scare tactic of protect the children, that's really what it is about. But I think we all know that's not what it's about. I wish America cared more about protecting children than it does, but it's more about protecting the wallet. There's always going to be challenges around underage access. That is true for tobacco and alcohol as well. But I think it's really just about they're competing for share. And I think regulated products have a much tougher road just getting people to walk in the dispensary door if they're not already consumers of cannabis and comfortable with that.
Let's say I'm a kind of an up-and-comer hemp beverage person, and my brand's doing pretty well, but can you give us kind of like best practices? What should I be doing from a branding and brand marketing perspective? Because, I hire you obviously first,
Full
right?
stop.
Okay. But are there any like best practices out there for this type of product?
I don't know that there's a best practice just for this type of product, but there are best practices for marketing a CPG brand, and I think that is our secret sauce. Is that's what I spent my career doing, and those are the principles that I, you know, approach this category with. I have found that even the brands I work with that are, brands that people might think of as a stoner brand, they don't want to be in the high times. They want to be in New York Times, right? They want to be mainstream. They already have their stoner consumer captured, and they do need to keep that consumer engaged, but there's not growth there. The growth is in the mainstream. And so, when we work with brands, first, I always tell them I won't take a brand on before they have their retail, structure figured out. Because if you don't have distribution, as I said earlier, PR and marketing is not going to help you. You really do need a distribution partnership. And so when I'm working with somebody that has already, they're already in Total Wine, they're already working with distributors, that is a really good sign, as well as they've already got, a DTC play in place. They have affiliate marketing, which is really critical if you want to actually get any press coverage for your product. So some of those things are really table stakes, even just to start. The other piece of this is just starting to show up where consumers are. And we really push our clients. We call the company Trailblaze because it is about trying to get out there first and forge a bit of a trail where others haven't been. So like our client, Stores and Bickle, they just did the first ever cannabis lounge at the Super Bowl in February, and that's something that hadn't been done before. We also did one at Art Basel. We increasingly are, pushing our clients to show up in mainstream places where consumers are and start to kind of normalize this. So really just taking that ABI playbook. What's the consumer passion point, across entertainment, music, sports? Where is the consumer? Because sampling is so important. A lot of people, once they sample these products, really enjoy both the effect and the taste, and the fact that they don't feel like shit the next day, especially as we age. So, but they have to have that experience first. So, music festivals, a big piece of what we do is just helping bring our clients together with those entertainment properties, which again is, I think, where my background comes into play because whether it's Live Nations of the world or the sports organizations, we have experience working with them and bringing products into those spaces. So that is a really big piece of our approach. And ultimately, it's storytelling. It's, mainstream storytelling, so that people understand your brand, what is special about it. And also at the same time, you have to be educating them about what THC is, what the benefits are of these products, why it's safe to go in the water, and, how to find safe products versus products that are maybe unregulated, because I think there's a lot of people that are afraid of getting something that is tainted or that is too much. And everyone's had that one terrible pot brownie experience at some point in their life, or edible experience that has scarred them. So kind of getting them over that hill too.
I was with Jen when she had her experience. It was
No,
hilarious.
that wasn't the worst one. The worst one for me was on a boat. No.
What were you doing on a boat?
Honestly, this is kind of one of the reasons that I do love beverages as a format for this product, because I myself am not a big fan of edibles. They have their place, especially, I like them for sleep and things like that. But it's really tough to know how they're going to affect you, even if you are a regular user. You don't know how long it will necessarily take for them to kick in, how strong it will be. Sometimes people don't feel it, so they take another one. So it's not the controlled experience. You can have a lot more control if you smoke or inhale, but after 30 years of being told not to smoke, I think it's hard for a lot of people to get on board with starting, to vapor inhale if they weren't already doing that. So beverages are fantastic because, they are lower dose. They are social, they're sessionable. You can put one in a cup and nobody even knows what it is. Although I have found that whenever I've brought them to parties, there's actually a lot of curiosity and interest in them. I think just bringing, when you're bringing like a pink can in, that's not too intimidating for people. So I think beverage is really going to continue to be the category that ultimately defines the space and where we're going to see the most CPG scale over time, just because it's a format people are comfortable with. It's social. You can do it at home or, at a bar. And we are already starting to see these products in bars, in restaurants. So, I think that's a behavior that people will recognize.
I think it's the best way to consume it is through beverages. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious what your single most successful campaign has been at Trailblaze in this space?
Well, I'd like to think we've had a lot of them, but what several of these trophies back there are for is one of my favorites, which is the world's biggest pot brownie, which is something that we did in 2020 for a client called MaryMed. But the reason that I love it is when we started working with this particular company, they're MSO or a multi-state operator, meaning that they're kind of the parent company that they have cultivation, they process and create products, and then they sell them at retail. So they do have their own product brands. And when they came to us, they had really no press coverage. They had no analysts covering them, even though they were publicly traded. And, they just, were kind of a third tier MSO that didn't have a lot of awareness. But they did have a head of communications who was a marketing pro and had worked for major brands like McDonald's and understood marketing and understood PR stunts. So they came to us and said, we know we want to do some kind of PR stunt. And we talked about what they had coming up. And they mentioned that they had this brownie SKU that they were going to be relaunching that was, a soft baked THC brownie, but they were only selling it in one store, like an hour outside of Boston, launching right before the holiday, which we knew nobody would care about or write about. And they also, of course, like everyone in cannabis, didn't have a big budget. So we brainstormed a lot of ideas and kind of looked at the cultural calendar and saw that National Brownie Day was coming up and pitched them the idea of building the world's biggest pot brownie. And we researched, how big it had to be, for Guinness and just what was the biggest that had ever been done, how much THC it could have, which 20,000 milligrams was the legal limit for a medical product in the state of Massachusetts, where they were based at the time, and brought it to our partner. It took a lot of work to get that through their C-suite, but it was one of those things that we were either going to get fired or win awards, because it was very, very new for them. But we worked with their kitchen to figure out how to bake it. We knew we would need a fantastic photo of it, and so we let it rip for National Brownie Day. It ended up going viral. We had over 1,800 stories. SNL included it in their weekend update. Every late night show had it in their monologue. TSA, Homeland Security, did a post about it, a jokey post about why you can't fly with your 850-pound brownie. It was covered everywhere from Associated Press and People to USA Today. And what I love about that is it's one of the things that I really did take away from my time at ABI, which is a really simple but universal idea combined with strategic timing and a strategic message, right? So it was really, we knew that everybody knew what a pot brownie was. We knew that if we had a really funny image, that it was going to be a story, that an image was really going to sell it. And it was all about the timing. I think if we would have done this, just in the middle of May, it wouldn't have had the same effect as it did by doing it on a news peg, which is National Brownie Day. But what I love the most about it is that even though it was a PR stunt, within 6 weeks, 3 analysts started covering them. Immediately, their stock bumped about 12-13% and held. The product sold out, and the CEO told us it was the most effective thing that they did the entire year for driving their sales, that it created a lot of meetings and retail conversations for them and just really put them on the map in a way that I think continues. And that's really what good, storytelling and marketing should do. And that's why our tagline is that we put brands on the map, right? We're really trying to, come up with ways to break through. And so, yeah, we're very proud of that one. And also that it won not just cannabis awards, but some mainstream awards, especially in 2020, which is kind of early days. So, and we didn't have a celebrity. We didn't have $1 billion. I think that cost us $3,000 to do, primarily for the ingredients. Also it just was a really outside of the box idea, as opposed to the days when I used to spend $150,000 on ice for a giant luge at ABI.
Times have changed, but they stay the same. It seems like, the blocking and tackling of marketing always works. Get people's attention.
Yeah.
That's a great story. Well, we're running up on time, but I know Jen always has extra questions. So we'll sling one more at you.
Okay, just one more. So, what's next for Trailblaze?
What is next? I mean, if I knew what was next for the cannabis industry, that would probably tell me more. As I think you know, we were acquired in 2022 by Acceleration. We were the first cannabis agency to be acquired and maybe still the only. And they are a parent company based in LA. We are one of 6 agencies they own, and by far the smallest. They own DKC, which is a really large communications agency, MKG, which is a great experiential agency, and so on. And so that's been really exciting to start to elevate our game and work with those other agencies. As such, like we're starting to work with other types of products outside of just cannabis. We just launched a campaign for So Chill Chips with Jimmy Fallon, for example. We're doing a campaign with John Cena for Metrics, and have some really fun things coming up with their portfolio of products. So that's really exciting. But, cannabis and beverage kind of remains my first love. I think we want to still be leading in that space. And we're really starting to evolve our positioning just to be about expertise in highly regulated spaces. So in addition to cannabis, we do work with alcohol. We represent Snoop Dogg's gin and juice and still gin products. We have done quite a bit of work in the psychedelic space, which I think is super interesting, really behind THC and cannabis in terms of where it is. But if they were to get like the right FDA approvals at a certain point, that space could really take off with CPG brands.
Like
And
mushrooms.
yeah, mushrooms, and microdosed products. We have also done, PR for psilocybin resorts, worked with Bob Marley's family and his progeny on their many projects. So that's an interesting space too. But even just continuing to get into packaged goods, nutraceuticals. The food space is getting really interesting now because our food clients are all focused on taking colors and dyes out of their products now to get ahead of the new administration. So really any category that is navigating, changes in their sector, or are in a highly regulated space is really where our expertise is. Brand marketing is what we lead with, but we do a lot of the behind the scenes crisis and brand and strategic positioning work as well.
Well, Lisa, thank you so much for being on Beernet Radio. You were such a delight to work with back at AB, and such a respected person there. It's great to reconnect with you in your latest venture, and we wish you all the best. And whenever I blaze, I do it on a trail. So I just wanted to say that.
Yes, well, I always encourage all of my clients to be following you guys. I basically tell them you are the page 6 of the industry, the first thing that all of the distributors and brands read before they get out of bed. And it really does, move markets, the work that you guys do. People pay a lot of attention to it. You're very influential. So we never ignore what you guys are doing or talking about. We love working with your whole team, and hope to work with you guys down the road on all these THC beverages and wherever this space goes.
Yeah.
I think you're talking about it and supporting it. Distributors are very interested in it. I hear from them all the time, wanting the scuttle, wanting to know where to invest, which brands to invest in. So you're definitely barking up the right tree.
Well, thank you. I mean, normally we get National Enquirer of the industry, so I think page 6 is a step up.
Right.
So
there's no aliens involved, so otherwise, yeah.
Well, great. Well, thank you so much for being on Beernet Radio, and we'll catch you down the road.
Awesome. Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah.
Take care.
All right.
Cheers.